Great.
Welcome to the AI Digest. My name is Joaquin Melara, and with me today is the lovely Laura Barboza. Laura, it's a pleasure to
Thank you,
have you.
Joaquin.
And I
I'm
have to
happy to be
say,
here.
I'm really happy to have you for several reasons. One, you're incredibly intelligent. We met recently, but I feel like we have so many similarities in our mode of operation. And for one of the key features of why I like you so much is there are so little Central Americans in technology and higher education and doing things like these that it's a warm welcome to find
That's right. We're neighbors, and you're right. Yeah, there's very few of us, but hopefully that'll change soon enough as we continue to share our experience with others. They can see themselves reflected in us.
I'm I'm interested in getting a little bit on your background. As your title suggests, you are a customer experience strategist, and you are also a higher
Mm,
education educator, higher education instructor,
that's right.
professor. Can you tell us a little bit about some of
Yeah.
the work that you do?
Yeah, so I'll start with my consulting work, which is in customer experience, user experience. Um, I've been in the field for about 16 years and always focused on research. As we all know, customer experience and user experience, there's a lot of different roles in that environment, in that field. But I've always focused on the research side. I love talking to people. I love understanding how their mental models, shape their lives. And it's a love for psychology that I've always had that I get to play with as part of my work. So, in terms of the work that I've done, I mean, I've worked in house as an embedded researcher for lots of different companies, Nordstrom, REI. There's a lot of e-commerce in my history, my professional history, and I've done a lot of consulting work. And consulting work, I mean, the experiences, run the gamut from doing educational stuff to doing healthcare related projects to doing more e-commerce. And lately, in the past, I want to say in the past 5 years, I've done a lot of physical space work. So, for example, the Amazon Just Walk Out cashierless supermarket. I helped with that project. I helped them launch their first Just Walk Out grocery store. And I love those physical experiences because it expands way beyond the digital screen. And it's a very holistic way of doing CX and UX work. Um, I've had my own agency, just really myself, but I've had my own clients. I've been a vendor for Microsoft, for Amazon, and yeah, just have a lot of experience, kind of on all sides of the table, if you will. Right? I know what internal needs are for, say, internal teams, internal product teams, but I also know how to serve as a consultant in an agency. So it's been really wonderful to work in that space. And in terms of my teaching, I've been teaching for 13 years now. I've always taught part time, and so I like this idea of being a a practitioner, right? That brings her experience in the real world into the classroom so that I can set the right expectation for my students, so I can give them a taste of what the real world is like and better prepare them at the end to work in the field of UX.
You are based out of Florida, is that correct?
That's
Mi-
right.
Mi- Mi- Miami in
Miami.
particular. Hmm. And
That's right.
just as your background, it's eclectic. You do a lot. I mean, you certainly, I think you thrive in the novelty of rediscovering problems from multiple angles and different areas. Um,
Oh yeah.
how does that environment in Miami complement that sort of uh, buzz of energy.
How do I say this? I mean, I should add, or I should start with saying that a big compliment, at least, in terms of my background, is that I'm Latina, I'm Costa Rican, and I mean, my heart lives in this space. I grew up in Miami as well. And so when I think about how in product development or in product design, we're trying to be more inclusive, we're trying to bring diverse perspectives into the mix. I also think about how little diversity exists in the world of UX, and so I figured that by working from Miami, I could maybe share a little bit more of that wealth with others in this space, so that we can bring more diversity into the field in the next coming years. So in that way, there's that complementary kind of piece. There's also the globalization of so much, right? Like we don't just do research in one area anymore. We do research virtually now. We want that inclusivity in terms of the feedback and the data that we collect. And Miami is known as an international hub, particular to Latin America. And so my advantage to speaking Spanish, to bringing more more wisdom around UX to this part of the United States is an advantage. Believe it or not, UX is not as well known or common down here in the Southeast as it is in the Pacific Northwest, right? I spent 15 years in Seattle, Washington, found user experience as someone who didn't know this field existed, and I'm trying to inform and bring it back, but also share, right, in the space, share in work that is coming out of Latin America. Lately, I've been hearing a lot of agencies or companies outsourcing some of their engineering work to Argentina, to be exact. And I thought to myself, if we can teach UX, CX, right, as part of that engineering process, and support some of that strategy into these Latin American dotted lines, if I may call them that, right? It's a win-win for all of us. So I'm strategically placing myself in this hub to bridge. This is how I like to say it. I like to bridge my experience, having educated myself and worked in the Pacific Northwest that is very tech focused. I'm trying to bring that over into this space and expand into Latin America and beyond.
Sounds exciting, and I'm sure you're gonna make waves. I mean, this is if you're talking about impact, if you're talking about strategy, and we're gonna talk a lot about that in this conversation. I have complete confidence that you're gonna achieve the goals that you would like to achieve at the magnitude and impact that you would like to achieve it. Completely trust that
Thank you
to
so
happen.
much. I
Um,
hope it does.
it will. I trust. I trust. So let's dive right into this. Let's go in the deep end. I think that there are some words that are very shapeless. That it's
Mm,
not very easy to get an idea of how these multidimensional dynamic things work. In
mm,
particular, branding and strategy. I mean, those are words that if you said user experience as something that is unknown, people use these words and they assign all kinds of wild definitions to, but nobody can bring it down to how does this translate into everyday actions? How do we use this as a differentiator, as a north star, as a compass, and how do we filter our decision making through these lenses? So maybe we can take
mm.
some time to just outline what is branding and strategy from the perspective of doing the right thing, finding what the right thing is.
Yeah. So I'm going to start with strategy, and I agree with you 100%. These are such broad terms that can be used and implemented in so many different ways. But for me, right, my definition of strategy in my work is essentially thinking big picture. It's about zooming out and thinking about everything that exists and how, maybe from a sense making standpoint, how we can essentially organize ourselves, how can we plan deeply and be more holistic, right, about what we're building and why we're building it. And sometimes that should be reversed, right? Why are we building what we're building, and therefore how should it be built, right? So that, from a strategy standpoint, is how I see the world, right? A zoom out, big picture, end to end experience, right? And even like up and down, backwards and forwards, inside out, because I've started these days to think more beyond, right, the customer, right, the end user, the consumer. There is also a lot of thought that goes into how do the employees within a company experience their day to day, whether they are sitting in a corporate office or in the field, right, in a grocery store with a customer. There's also operations experience and strategy, which is how are we efficiently doing what we need to do? We all know, those of us who have worked in-house, and maybe not even in-house, but those of us who have touched upon, projects and teams that are within organizations, we know that sometimes it's not very easy to incorporate some of our strategies. It's not very easy to incorporate some of our decision making. And sometimes it's because internally operations may not be ready to receive, right, the insights, ready to absorb and act upon those insights. So strategy, helps us do that and helps us ease the process and facilitate, the incorporation of strategy work into the mix. So that's on the strategy front. When it comes to branding, branding is heavily, in my opinion, influenced by strategy. It's just that at this point, branding is kind of how do I position this? The way that I talk about branding versus UX, for example, as I teach the two now, I see branding as something that a company pushes out into the world. It's their message, how they want to be perceived, their mission and vision, and their ultimate goal, right, for bringing whatever they're bringing to customers, right, to consumers. Where UX is a pull, right? You're pulling information, you're understanding what the audience wants, you are understanding what's going on in the market, and then we're kind of translating that into how it makes sense to the business and therefore the brand, right? So it's about business strategy, brand strategy, and of course, audience and UX strategy, right? And so that push-pull, right? Pushing of content, pulling of information, allows us to create a brand or to inform a brand so that they can position themselves in a way that is attractive to the consumers they're trying to reach, to the target segments that they focus on. And it's not just like, of course, shoving ideas in people's brains, but kind of dancing with them and co-creating together, right? And so from a branding standpoint, for me, strategy is very important because it's not just about what I want or what the company wants and what looks cool, but also what makes sense and what could be offered for the benefit of all. Does that make sense?
When you said first, I love everything that you said, and I it's food for thought for me even after this call to sort of refine my hypothesis of how all this works. But as you were saying that branding is sort of a push into the wider ecosystem, into the wider environment, I was thinking it is a signal, it is a frequency, but more more intimately, closer to the core of the organization, closer to the strategy of the organization, what you're trying to pull in, it's it boils to a communication strategy, verbal,
That's right.
nonverbal, an experience, as you're saying. It takes into consideration how you want to attract the people that you want to help, the problem that you want to solve, and help them maximize the value and efficiency of the resources used, whether that be capital, whether that be the time schedule of employees coming in to perform a task, or whether that be, advertising, marketing campaign, and how they can all mesh together to build one unified, multi-directional, multi-dimensional, omni-channel, um, thing. I mean, I don't know what to piece it all together with, but um, yeah, interesting. So who decides
Yeah,
what
and
is
you
the
know
right
what,
thing?
Joaquin?
Oh, sorry. Go
Can
ahead.
I add one more thing to that? No problem. But when you mentioned communication strategy, I want to throw another buzz term in there because yes, it is communication strategy, but nowadays we call it content strategy, right? Nowadays, or at least in my world, right, of UX, CX, um, it's all about content strategists, right? Or content strategy, where we are kind of figuring out what content to create, whether that's a product, whether it's a service, whether it's the communication aspect of those products and services, but then also how does that translate for us internally? Internally, we know that content strategy is equally as important because it's very important for me in, say, a strategy department to communicate my thoughts and my ideas and my plans to the branding team, to the product team, to my stakeholders who are trying to understand why are we doing this in the first place and why are you trying to motivate us, right, to go this route. So 360-degree content strategy, I think, is very closely, if not replacing, communication strategy.
If we were to make a physical representation of this, I mean, strategy is the brain, right? Strategy is kind of like, well, no, strategy is we want to achieve that thing, and there's a way that we can leverage the things that we have to achieve that thing. But between the strategy or the thinking of this set of decisions to make is the body, the corporate, the corpus, the grouping of actors that can perform that, the actions required to get to that objective. So yeah, interesting. You're right. Content is a more appropriate terminology, and it's what's used to describe all sorts of media, whether it's literature, video, pictures, etc. And I think it more accurately
Mhm.
captures physical experiences, digital experiences, emotional experiences. Interesting. Who decides what is the right thing to do?
Oof, I mean, I think that's a team effort. Um, I'm at the end of the day, I'm not the type of researcher who says this is what the customer wants, therefore this is what we need to build. That's not what research is about. It's about understanding the goals, the problem space, the motivations and barriers of the consumers, and then taking that information and trying to understand based on what we want to offer as a business, as a company, as a product, how do we meet those needs or how do we position our solution, so to speak, um, alongside those needs of the market, right? So I think it's a co-creation exercise through and through where we collect information from the end user, the customer, the consumer, to understand, what's going on for them. Then we talk about like, okay, how does that align with business strategy? How does that align with like our mission vision as a corporate entity or as an organization? And then ultimately, from the technical teams, if you will, right, what is feasible? Because at the end of the day, just because the business wants to do it, just because the customer wants it, doesn't necessarily mean that it's the right thing to do financially, technically, time wise, right? Like if we want to launch something in 6 months from now, we have to work within that guardrail, within that constraint. So that's my catch-all answer, and it feels a little bit like a cop-out, but it's really not. I truly believe that decision making is not done by one group or one person. It's a coming together of information from various work streams or from various channels that ultimately help a team of people make a decision.
I'm very satisfied with that answer. It's not one person or one situation. It's a dynamic dialogue in with the internal and the external, and finding the way that you both find value and you can create that value and it's well received. At any point that any of that is not working in harmony, it shows in the bottom line, and it shows in the morale of the
Mm-hmm.
employees and the morale of the internal
100%.
customer complaints. I mean, there are smells, there are visual indicators, there are audible sounds that happen when things happen well or not well, and that's strategy,
Mm-hmm.
that's content, that's all that. Um,
That's right.
so to ground this back to doing the right thing, how do we measure success? And to make that, to compound that with another question, how do we ensure that we're continuously coming closer to the right thing? I mean, there might be
I think,
there might be a set of options, and we may have to evaluate a few before we can actually fall into the one that we can be content with, at least for the time being.
yeah. So, like, I think starting with that idea of like, how do we continuously work towards the right thing? I think that's a never-ending process. I think there will always be work to do. There will always be opportunities for improvement. There will always be um, a need, right, to meet because we evolve on a day-to-day basis as individuals, as human beings, as corporations, and businesses. Like we change daily, right? Our goals are constantly shifting, so to speak. So I think that ensuring that we're heading in the right direction ultimately for me is really based on like what are the goals, the intentions, what is the mission and the vision behind what we're doing, because that's kind of the crux of it all for me, right? Like we need to stay true to the brand, true to the product, and even though that brand and that product will evolve, over time, it it doesn't mean that one minute we're talking about sustainability and then the next minute we're talking about um I don't know, reaching as many people as possible, right? Like I think that sustainability slowly, is woven in, and or like should always be woven into the frameworks of whatever it is that we're trying to accomplish. A company doesn't necessarily have to stand firmly on like we need to save the planet, right? It's not so much about sticking to that message more than it is about weaving it in through in small ways, right? Through what we're doing every day. So that I think continuing to keep an eye on what our initial goal is, our initial intention is, and then making sure that we are moving in the direction of evolution and growth and obviously financial gain, without compromising our initial values, without compromising that initial vision, is really important, not just for the company, because it makes sure that we don't lose sight of why we're doing what we're doing, but also for the customers because they can establish or like feel trust towards a company that isn't just like all over the place, right? That one minute they're talking about this, and then the next minute they're talking about something else, and then suddenly they're really not standing for what they said they were here for, if you will.
I like these layers that we're painting for the audience, the people listening, that we live in a dynamic world, and whatever it is that you create
We do.
is not a static representation, and it needs to have an element of co-creation with the internal environment, the external environment. It needs to fulfill
Mhm.
some sort of function, in the external environment for it to be
Mhm.
useful and sustainable. Um, so let's bring in one more concept into the mix, positioning, because you did mention some words that
Mm.
you relate to positioning. We talked about, okay,
Yeah.
you don't have to say save the planet, but you're not gonna sell chicken one day, hamburgers the next, and pizza the next. I mean, people are gonna look at you like some sort of crazy person. It might work in the longer stick to something, but positioning is one of the linchpins of strategy and branding.
Yeah, and I really want to clarify for the audience and for ourselves even like that it's not about like sticking to what you said you were going to do because evolution is important, right? Like evolution does require a little bit of change, right? Uber started as a ride share and then suddenly now Uber Eats is highly profitable, right? And very much used, right, by consumers. And it's a great service, right? So it doesn't mean that you only have to stick to what you said you were going to do, but it's also about making sure that the brand is not offering too much and diluting itself, right? Uber is not cooking the food for you. They are still delivering. So the delivery is the core of, the Uber concept, right? Either you deliver a person from point A to point B, or you deliver a meal from a restaurant to a house, right? So it's about sticking to that value or that core concept, if you will, but then having room to play around it, right? Having room to then think about what would be Uber's next potential, business unit or business model, right? Like, can it still be delivery, but is it going to be delivery of something else? Can it deliver information? Can it deliver healthcare? Can it deliver something else? And then suddenly it's maybe it's Uber Clinic, not at all associated with food, not at all associated with rides, but it's still delivering, right? So just wanted to make that super clear. And you're absolutely right, because we live in a dynamic world and because technology is helping us move so incredibly fast, right? Let's take AI, as an example. We know AI to be ChatGPT, today. AI has been around for a very long time, right? As machine learning is not new, um, language models are not new, but the way in which we're engaging with these things is evolving, it's changing. 6 months from now, we don't know what AI can do. We have no idea, but that we can expect a change sooner rather than later. Yeah, so that means we need to be flexible, we need to be agile, we need to be able to flex and bend um, so that we take advantage of these new technologies and take advantage of the opportunities that are um, brought along with those technologies, while also of course being responsible to not just the brand and the vision but also to the consumer, right, and the employees working within the space.
Yeah, there's so much to take into account, but at the bottom line, I think doing the right thing is not so much as making one decision, but making a multitude of decisions at regular frequencies, at regular intervals, with regular check ins to make sure that you are adapting to the moving trends, to the feedback from the internal, feedback from the external, and figuring out how to keep it sustainable. Because even if you build something
Hmm.
that may be popular or successful in the near term, you want to sustain that so it doesn't fizzle out or explode or implode in one way or another. Um, so
That's right.
we talked about we talked about doing the right thing. What about preparing to do the thing right? I mean, we have an idea of we want to do some sort of mission vision. We have an overarching thing. We have a series of constraints. We're working with early stage customers and with early stage employees, and we're all just learning and we're talking to each
Hmm.
other. Where do we begin to shape that to doing the thing right?
Yeah. Yeah. So if the strategy is the anchor, right? It's what keeps us grounded. It's what keeps us focused, right? On what we're setting out to do. And now we have, from strategy work, we have a better idea as to what needs to be done. Now it's, how do we implement that into our work processes? How do we get our teams behind it? How do we organize ourselves to do the thing and do it right? And that's where I think, if it's a good time to talk about service design and service blueprinting, to be exact, here's this introduction of this concept, right? The idea of thinking about who's going to help us, when will they help us, and essentially what are the roles and the responsibilities, so that we can, without, by minimizing the chaos, um, we can organize ourselves better to do the work without feeling kind of like that whiplash, or feeling the pressure to like get something done yesterday, right? So I would say that doing the things right is making sure that you have the right resources in place, that you have adequate budget to get, the thing done, and that you are continuously collecting feedback around that process, particularly if you're building something for a human consumer, right? Um, this goes back to the co-creation process. I feel like co-creation should never end. I think we can co-create to understand what we need to do, what is the right thing to do, and we can continue to co-create when we're building the right thing, to make sure we're building it right, that it's useful and usable to the people who will ultimately play with it, right? And consume it. Um, but that it's also making sense to the people building it, because their experience matters too.
I think one thing that happens when people try to build things in isolation, or they have an idea and they're chasing it, um, they don't have enough channels of feedback or to reflect on that feedback. There's not enough intervals to just make sure that may not need to pivot, but maybe refine certain ideas or pare down or expand.
Right.
This is something that is fundamentally lacking from the entrepreneurial landscape, and it's a reason why a lot of small businesses fail, a lot of entrepreneurs fail. It's because they may not have the vocabulary or the methodology to understand how to have a dialogue, how to co-evolve, how to generate value and make sure that it's sustainable. I think there's some elements that we've been
Yeah.
talking about that are huge red flags for people that don't know how to navigate that dynamic idea.
That's right. And I think that there's also, this is where I'll bring my research strategy experience into the mix. There's a lot of people who don't care for research, right? In their minds, it's like research takes too long, research bogs us down, it slows down the process, and ultimately we don't have time to pause and take 2 weeks to collect feedback, right? But in that case, that what that tells me a lot of times is that you don't have a continuous stream of feedback channels, to use, your term, right? And there's no one that is on a day-to-day basis collecting and synthesizing or making sense of this data that's coming in. So of course, if you're never collecting this feedback, and you do want it at one point, you do kind of have to pause and set yourselves up to conduct research, because it didn't start off as a worthy channel, right? But I really want to say research sometimes is seen as like a gatekeeper of things, and it doesn't have to be that way. Like, there could be a dedicated person keeping an eye on data, coming in from various streams. And I'm not just talking analytics data, right? I'm not just talking statistics and numbers. I'm talking about feedback from people, feedback from employees, feedback from consumers, feedback from ultimate customers, right? To tell us exactly like what's going on for them, and how well this one new feature might support X, Y, and Z, or Why is it that reserving something is better than buying it and then returning it later? So I think that if there was a dedicated interest in research and that was a lightweight process that is continuously part of the mix, the same way that finance is always continuously part of the mix, right? Are we staying on budget? Are we making money from this last, advertising push or whatever? The same thing could happen with research data. Keep everybody on tabs, right, with what is coming through, so that we can co-create without slowing down.
I think you said something interesting there. People see it as a blocker to producing something tangible of value. But you also said, I wish this can be baked in some fashion so that people can benefit from research. And I think one other misconception that people may have around research or these things is that there is a heavy upfront cost. And that is the farthest thing from the
Mhm.
truth, because at any moment you can deploy a lightweight Google form to ask three quantitative questions. How did you like the service? 1 to 5. How is this other component? 1 to 5, 1 to 5, and then you just have an open-ended question where you
Mhm.
can say, if you had a positive experience or negative experience, what would you like to see more of, or what would you not like to see more of? There are these little
Mhm.
mechanisms that can allow you to capture very valuable quantitative or qualitative information so that you can continuously tweak and tune and improve the experience for everybody involved.
That's right. And it doesn't have to be a pivot to your point. Like, I think a lot of times research is seen as like, oh well, if the feedback comes back that like people don't want to use this, then like we have to start over, and we don't have we can't afford starting over, so we might as well not ask them, right? But at that point you're just plugging your ears and not wanting to hear the data out of fear that like they may tell you that it may not work out. That's not the intention of research. The intention of research is to refine, not um, validate, if you will. Or I mean,
One
sometimes you do validate through research, but not dictate, I should say, the route that you're taking.
one of the things that I've learned in software development and quality assurance management for software is that they have a series of tests called smoke test, and that is derived from the time where people physically soldered circuit boards. So, say for example, a toaster, they would solder all the circuitry in the toaster so that the controls can regulate electricity to the heating element, and you can toast the toast according to whatever you want. If you
Mhm.
if you misconfigured a circuit board and you plugged it into the outlet, it would smoke because something fried. So I think we need to
That's
be
right.
getting closer to these smoke tests to make sure we check which toasters are fried, which assumptions we have that are wrong. We need to chase them like they're gold, because they're going to help us preserve resources and time and energy and commitment and psychological alignment to the thing that we want, internal bias. um, so we need to have that open-endedness where we can ground ourselves in some medium effective dose of truth at regular intervals and continue to pursue that vision from the high end.
I love that. And it's funny, as you mentioned, like smoke tests, I'm like, yeah, and research is the smoke signal, right? Like research is, what's helping you understand is there a little like spark happening over there, so we can address that little spark before it turns into a full-on like explosion. So yeah, it's really about being curious at the end of the day. Research is all about curiosity. It's not, again, meant to dictate and say, yes, that thing will blow up, or no, it won't blow up. It's more about how do we make sure that everything is still good? And if there's a little smoke, coming out of there, if there's a little spark coming out of there, how do we address that before it becomes a bigger problem? We all know of um, products and services that are launched into the market, and then 6 months later they're gone, and it was a full on test basically, but maybe we could have prevented that thing from failing if we had done a little bit more of these smoke tests and looked for those smoke signals, to help direct our work and inform our work.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's all just fear of wanting to know the truth that prevents us from sort of incorporating this, like, oh, I really want this to be true. If I just keep working on it, it'll be perfect. And when I put it out there, everybody will love it. Um, but you never
Yeah,
really,
I'm like that as a human.
yeah.
Yeah.
So we've talked about finding how to do the right thing, finding out how to prepare to do that thing right. Um, so now let's talk about doing the right thing under the right conditions, because I think the
Mm.
final constraint that we need to have is sustainability, and part of sustainability is adaptability, and also simultaneously having a robust, resilient, reliable system.
Yes, absolutely. And once again, this is where like service design, service blueprinting can really help because, when we talk about sustainability, which you're absolutely right, Joaquin, like sustainability is making sure that your employee base is able to do the work that is in front of them, that your business can still profit, off of what you're doing, that your customers can benefit from it. Like, is this a sustainable experience, from all the different perspectives, right? And with service design, particularly service blueprinting, that's what this framework helps do. Not only does it start with like, what is it that the customer is trying to achieve, which is the problem, right? Like, what is the customer problem that we're trying to solve? But then, how are we solving that problem? And what are the mechanisms that need to be put in place for us to um, successfully solve that problem and not create more problems for ourselves as we are trying to solve a problem for the customer. And so I think that operations experience is something that we need to think more about. I've done many service blueprinting workshops and activities in my career, and sometimes it's so clear to see where the bottlenecks are happening, and it's just really a matter of like, why do we have four different registration systems? Why can't, why, like, where can we, tweak something in the back end where we can consolidate? And then that way, you're not speaking, Spanish over here and then English over here with this other system, and, Hindi back there. Like, that everything can be streamlined, right, in a more comprehensive and free flowing way. I think that'll make so many different things more pleasant, and can allow for that flexibility and that need to kind of flex with the market as we experience changes, in these dynamic environments that we work in.
I just want to add a little bit of elasticity to that streamlining word, because I think sometimes people
Mhm.
see streamlining as like bare bones, skeleton crew, lean, mean, might team, and you want to have streamline just means that you have an efficient use of resources, but it doesn't mean that it might not offer you flexibility in terms of providing multiple services. You still can have the capability of having a dynamic mass customization system, with people or technology, like a factory. A factory can print things and do things with multiple colors and multiple things. It doesn't just need to produce gray blobs or gray shirts. So I just wanted to add that bit there. But I'm fully in alignment with everything
Yeah,
you're. I love this conversation.
I see. Me too. Thank you for the opportunity, Joaquin. And I wanted to add too that when I think about streamlining, like what I see in my head is like an open highway, right? Like if you want me to do, if you want me to get from where I'm at now to, my end point, right? Like my destination, I want to have a clear highway to get there. If there's traffic, if there's detours, if there's bottlenecks that interrupt me along the way, it's going to take me longer to get to my destination, right? And if on that clear highway, you want me to stop at any moment and you want me to go left for a minute because there was an opportunity in the market, maybe that work stream does let me do that. Maybe it allows me to go back a little bit and I'm still on the same highway to get to where I'm going to my destination, but I have the ability to flex. But if I'm stuck in traffic, I can't move backwards, I can't move forwards, I can't go left or right because there's all of this jam, right? That's in my way. And service blueprinting helps to prevent and maybe foresee some of those potential traffic jams that prevent us from doing the right thing and building it in the right way, right? We at those points, you've been here, I'm sure, many times as well. Well, at that point, we have to be like, well, then it has to be shipped that way. Oh, well, then, I guess it's going to be blue instead of green, right? Like, and that's when we start to make way more concessions and designing and building within constraints that didn't need to be constraints in the first place if we had organized and forecasted things a little more intentionally.
We want to drive in the autobahn. I think that's the name of the highway. Versus get stuck. We want to be the soccer mom carrying three kids,
True.
running at 120 miles per hour, rather than get stuck for 3 hours in one spot. Um,
It's true.
I love that. I love that analogy of driving on a highway. We don't want any impediments. We want no potholes.
Mm,
We want clear, accessible signs that tell us there's an exit, and that exit's going to take us closer to the thing we want to go to. That is a perfect
that's right.
analogy. Um,
That's right.
so now we should weave in a little bit of. I think at a high level, I think we've covered. Oh, I just want to add this bit. So anybody that's listened to this whole conversation so far, I want to just implant it in your head. Uh, Having a good reading on the capacity of internal employees to be able to be elastic and to have recovery and reflection mode to increase learnings is a requirement. It's
Mm,
not a plus.
hmm.
We were talking about how do we ensure that there's some sort of learning model. Every employee, every person in and around your enterprise is an observer, and we're all observing the same system from different perspectives, from a diverse set of eyeballs and experiences and brains. So giving room for not doing things and steeping in the system and providing feedback is a way to make it more adaptable and resilient. Um, you don't want to just hammer out your employees to if they're like a barista to crank out 12 espressos every 30 minutes. You're going to have times where you're going to have duress and stress and a crowd just bombard you with information requests, but then there's going to be times where you can do the maintenance work of cleaning and sweeping and talking to employees as humans because we're freaking humans and we need social
Hmm.
contact. um, so yeah, just wanted to add that bit in there as well.
Thank you for doing so.
Let's bring AI into this. I mean, I think we've talked about a lot of dynamic, hard to define things that we've given some shape to. We've given some definitions. I think we've painted some hard scenarios to kind of ground these ideas. But how can AI play a picture, play a role to augment the capabilities of researchers, of designers, of service designers, of gaining feedback loops?
To me, right? As I will admit that I'm learning about AI every day. I am by no means an expert and don't have the same perspective on AI that many other people do. But for me, it's about working more efficiently, right? If AI can help us work more efficiently and not necessarily faster. By efficiency, I don't mean faster. I think a product of efficiency is speed, right? But when we don't have to worry about, say, for example, um, waiting 2 weeks for the data analytics team to give us, an insight on like what happened last week, then we're staying on that autobahn, right? Like we're nothing is getting in our way, and we don't have to stop and like essentially put our hazards on and wait, right? So I think if AI can help us um, do some of the menial tasks that involve, say, for example, coding data. If AI can help us um, generate insights a little bit quicker, by collecting feedback from several different channels at the same time, that can help us with efficiency, right? If AI can I'm trying to think of like the most menial tasks that I do when it comes to my work, not only as a strategist, but also as a teacher. Like, um, I don't know, like if I don't have to waste time taking attendance, right? And if somehow the AI can like identify, right, that all my students are sitting in my class right now, that allows me to get to the heart of my work. That allows me to get to, the lesson of the day, right? And so the same is true internally. Like if I don't have to sit and um, schedule meetings with people and figure out for the next 15 minutes who's available, to what day and time, Joaquin and Laura can get together with, several other team members, that saves me multiple hours in a week, right? And so those are the things, in the spirit of not trying to come up with other examples, I think that's where AI can really support with efficiency purposes. But I will also include in this statement that I don't mean that AI is what gives you the answers, right? I
Mm-hmm.
worry that we, especially when it comes to generative AI and how AI is going to be used for research purposes,
Hmm.
we do not replace a human researcher with ChatGPT and ask ChatGPT, what is the next new feature that I should launch for my product? Like
No.
that is cutting a lot of corners, and it does give you an answer in, 5.6 seconds, but we don't know if that answer is correct because we don't know where that data is coming from. And if it's not coming from your niche audience, or if it's not coming from the population that you care about, then those insights that you received in 5 seconds mean nothing. And so I again want to position that next to this efficiency. I don't mean efficiency as in like try to get there as quickly as possible. I mean efficiency helps us do the best work possible and keeps the integrity of the work intact, while allowing us to essentially gain a little bit of speed when we do that.
I think it's so great that you put the little footnote. Please use with caution. May cause efficient wrong answers to occur very quickly. Um, I
Yes.
think I think what you said was insights, analysis. I think those things that would otherwise take a considerable amount of pattern recognition from our brains. I mean, I see the sticky notes on your in your wall. When I have sticky notes and I'm trying to cluster feedback patterns from a group of people, one good thing that I can do is I can collect clean data, create the right context as part of an experiment, as part of my existing methodology of research, feed it into the AI and say, what insights can you provide from this? What synthesis, what sentiment, what ideas are coming out as a majority cluster? And then validate it with my human experience, with my context. Okay, this is the healthcare domain. Okay, this is the restaurant domain. Okay, this is e-commerce and we're talking about shoes. You need to ground everything back into human intelligence because artificial intelligence is nothing but a shadow. And we are in the
Mhm.
infant stages of what it's capable of doing. So relying on it as a mission critical or career building tool is a recipe for not only um not only wrong answers but stunting your own capability to learn and grow. I think part of the benefit of doing the slow way is that you gain the pattern recognition and you get the hints that tell you whether AI indicates more or less the right or wrong answer. If we go from
Right.
school directly to application and skip the arduous work, the painstaking work of looking at the wall for hours and screaming like, what are you trying to tell me?" And we skip right into
Mhm.
ChatGPT, use that internal compass.
Yeah. And to use that same example, right? Let's say, for example, ChatGPT can build you a survey. And, great, it builds you a survey, but how do you know that survey was built correctly?
Mm.
How do you know if you don't have that foundational understanding of how surveys work, when you should use them, how to interpret the data, etc., then it doesn't matter that ChatGPT can build a survey in, less than a minute and that it could collect, hundreds of thousands of responses, within a day. Like, if it's not done well, then it's not going to give you the right insights, right? And this is where I caution, right? The use of generative AI or any AI that might, come through in the next few months. Um, Let us continue to practice critical thinking. And in order to practice critical thinking, when it comes to, in this case, a survey, you need to have a little bit of research knowledge. If you are not a researcher, then you can't fully trust that survey was built correctly because you didn't give, Chat GPT the proper guidelines, to your point.
I think people still need to trust ChatGPT as if it was a kid in its
Hmm.
developmental years, maybe a older kid or a teenager, but you cannot trust that it's fully trained or equipped to deal with all the complexities of what you need. For brainstorming or just synthesizing a general shape of what it is that you're looking for, I think um, that's where we can rely on it. But always double, triple check because teenagers and kids make things up all the time. Um,
That's right. That's right. I like to say that like a chat GPT, like, AI, um, is more of an intern than they are, a strategist. Don't use chat GPT as a strategist. Use chat GPT as a, a resource, right? That is helping you pull things together, but a resource that obviously needs a lot of your support in order for them to do the work you want them to do.
Laura, I've had such a lovely time speaking with you, and I think we can go on another 2 or 3 hours. Um, who who should talk to you, and what should they come to you for? What kind of guidance? What kind of help? Um, yeah.
I mean, I think there's so many people, definitely businesses, organizations, individuals who are interested in, a a clear kind of understanding of like what lies ahead for them, or how they can get something off the ground, are great, can greatly benefit from the work that I do. Students greatly benefit from the work that I do. I'm constantly teaching, whether I want to teach or not. I teach my clients, I teach in meetings. I'm constantly sharing. The way that I share information, I think, is always a little mini lesson. So definitely students interested not just in a career in customer experience, user experience, whatever that might be, branding, right, advertising. I can definitely help them think through, but really, it's anybody who's interested in seeing the big picture and gaining clarity around that could really benefit from the work that I do. large, small, medium, it doesn't matter. And particularly individuals who are looking for a diverse perspective. I have a diverse lived experience. Once again, I speak English and Spanish fluently. I have cultural understanding and relevance that is something that like money can't buy, right? You can't learn how to be, a acculturated Hispanic in Miami, Florida, right? From Latin America. Like that's just something that you pick up on in, as you grow and live. So yeah, I think that would be my message. And whoever might be interested in talking more, we can always finesse the conversation and get to a point where either I can connect you to somebody I may know. I have plenty of connections that can support work in either product or service design. And yeah, I mean, we will get there together, even if it's just as a connection, right? Someone to know.
So students, organizations looking to design unique experiences
Mhm.
that are immersive and communicate through omnidirectional channels, but still hold
That's right.
a position in communication content strategy. Um, yeah, for sure. Just this conversation should be a vouch for Lauda's capabilities, and we've only touched the tip of the iceberg. I welcome you guys to go reach out to her. So thanks again for being on the
Oh,
show,
thank you.
and
Thank you, Joaquin.